Ooh. And we are back. So, now we're going to start making the skeleton. First thing we got to do is go to our menu set over here and change it from modeling to rigging. And then you'll notice that our menus will change to all of the rigging options. And next thing I want to do is sometimes it's handy to have um, the joints of our skeleton show through the geometry so we can see where they are. So there's a couple ways to do that. I could turn on X-ray mode, or you can go to view, view, oh, it's shading. So you can just X-ray joints. So now the joints, I don't have any in here, you can't see them yet, but if I have X-ray joints on, it will show the joints over top of the geometry, which is kind of handy because then they won't disappear when they're in the middle of something. And we're kind of done. Let's say we're happy with our character. I know it's super low budget. It's just an exercise, so we're not going to worry about it too much. But when we're doing a skeleton, we're not really worried about the geometry. In fact, the geometry is really just going to get in the way. So what I want to do is turn off the ability to select the geometry by accident. So right here, if that isn't open for you guys, just click this little divider and it'll spin out. This one right here is geometry. So I'm going to turn that off. And now I can't select the geo, which is exactly what I want because it'll just get in the way and we don't really need it. We don't really need to edit it at all, so let's just keep it that way. Okay, so now we're going to start actually laying down some joints. So I'm going to switch to my front view and hold space bar. Ooh, might have to hit it twice and go front view. If you don't want to do that, you can hit space, get your fore view. Here's one that says front. Then I'll just hit space and I'm in my front view. I typically just like to use the space bar method, just quicker, easier, but whatever you're comfortable with. So where are the joints? They are under the skeleton menu. So create joints. I'm going to choose the option box. And in my notes, it actually says to, I don't recall why, but it says to do this, so I'm going to. Orient joints to world. I'm just going to click that for now. And that's really all we have to do. So create joints, go to the option box, orient joints to world. So not sure why, but we're going to do that. So now I'm going to go skeleton, and instead of hitting the option box, I'm going to go create joints. So now I'm in the create joint tool. So the first, actually, you know what? I just thought of something better. Let's not create a joint. I'm going to get out of that tool. I'm just going to hit W to go to my move tool, and I'm going to go back. Before I start creating joints, what I really should do is create a control for the entire body of this character. So controls are actually usually just represented as curves. So let's find the curves shelf here, and I'm just going to hit circle, and that is going to plunk down a circle right on the floor, which is exactly where we want it. And you'll see it in our outliner right here. It says NURB circle. So I'm just going to rename that, and we're going to call this root control. People call it all kinds of stuff. I know what it means, so I'm going to call mine root control. Okay, so that's what first thing we're going to do. And now what we want to do is create all the joints parented to that root control. So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to go to my front view, and I'm going to go skeleton, create joints. And the first joint you always create is the hip joint. So that's your sort of center of mass, your In the body, if you think about your own body, everything sort of revolves around your hip. It's really your center of mass. So that's where we're going to start. And I'm just going to click. And it says joint 1. But why? Oh, X-ray joints got turned off. So I'm going to have X-ray joint. You'll see it's just this little speck. And I don't really want that. So I'm going to go to display. I want to actually see these things. Animation, joint size, and I'm just going to crank this up. Something like that. 10, whatever works for you, as long as you can see it. The actual size of a joint at this stage doesn't really matter. So it's just a visual thing. So 10, I can actually see it now, so that's good. And let's rename it to hip. And I'm going to parent that right in the root. So how I did that is middle mouse hold and drag under the root. Okay. And I'm going to move back to my move tool. Very, very important when you're creating joints and we're going to be mirroring stuff. We really need this joint to be exactly in the middle. And if you go over to our channel box here with that hip selected, you'll see that it's not quite in the middle. It's minus 0.002 off. So what we need to do is go into translate and just hit 0 and make sure that this joint is in the middle. That is absolutely vital. Okay, so next we're going to go down this way. So the next one would be the upper leg. So I'm going to go skeleton, create joints, and I'm going to click on the hip so the hip is selected. And what that will do is it'll automatically parent it for us. So if I click right here at the top of where our next joint should be, oh, it duplicated the size. That's crazy. Radius 2, so I can drop that back down also like that. So 0.5 or 1 should be fine. Not sure why it does that, but it does. So you'll see now that the hip below that is our upper leg. So I'm going to call that upper leg right. And I will start with the next one. Okay, so if I don't have it selected and I create the next one, you'll see what happens. Not to panic. Oh, lagged a bit there. I just need to click once. So now, because I didn't have upper leg right selected when I created the next joint, it didn't automatically parent it. It doesn't really matter. I can just parent it myself. So I'll just middle mouse drag that in there. And it creates that for me. So I will call that lower leg right. And I'll just change that to 1 so it's all the same. And we'll go down here and I will select it over here and then I will hit create joint. And for some reason it just multiplies whatever I've got by 2. I'm not sure why it does that. So I'll call this foot right. And I'm going to change that back to 1. I'm going to go back to my move tool. Whoops. Going to change back to object mode. You really want to be in object mode. Change that back to 1. And I'm actually going to change this hip back to 1 as well. You know, I don't know why it does that. It just does. Okay, so with the leg, what we really want in this case, not always, but it's good to have these in a straight line. So I'm going to click on this knee or the lower leg right joint. And I'm just going to make sure that X is 0. Because if I type in, so if I look here, it says translate X minus 0.2. That's fine. But everything after this joint, we want in a straight line. So we don't want this to be anything other than 0. Otherwise we'll get, you know, that's a bit dramatic, but we want it to be in a straight line. So just make sure that this joint X is 0, and then we'll take a look at the foot. And see, this one isn't quite 0, so I'm just going to 0 that out. So yeah, we just want them in a straight line, these two following this joint. Okay, so next, what are we going to do? Because we're going to mirror these joints over later to this side, I'm not going to worry about making the left side yet. So I'm going to go back to my skeleton, create joint. I'm going to hit hip, just so it selects it next in the chain, and I'm going to pop one right here. There it goes, makes it big again, I don't know why. And so that parented to the hip. If you didn't have it selected, here, I'll just delete it and make a new one. So if I didn't have the hip selected when I created that, I can just parent it myself. Middle mouse drag right under the hip, because that's where we want it. And I'll 0 that out. Hit 1. There we go. And we'll call this spine. Perfect. Let's hit save, Control S. And now I will notice how it's starting a new sort of hierarchy under the hip, because we're going up this time and we're not going down. So I'm going to go create joint, select the spine, and I'm going to pop one right here for the chest, 0 that out, make that 1. And I'm going to pull down here, and it says under the spine is the new joint, and I'm going to call that chest. There we go. Change all those back. Okay, so the next joint is a funny one. Well, you might think we'll go straight over to the arm, which you could, but there is a better way to do this. And we're going to add in one extra joint here. You'll see why later on when we start doing the IK handles, but we really want an extra joint in here, and you're just going to have to trust me on this one. So I'm going to go create joint, I'm going to hit chest, and I'm going to put one sort of right here. Perfect. And this, you don't have to 0 this out, because we don't want this on this axis. We can keep that whatever it is, but I'm just going to reduce the size a little bit. Okay, so what this one is going to be called is clavicle. So I'm going to call this clavicle right. And once again, you're just going to have to trust me, but I'll show you why we make that clavicle when we start actually rigging this thing. And it is quite important. So just take my word for it, make that clavicle, and we'll come back to it. So next one, skeleton, create joints. Let's do the arm here. So I'm going to put it right about there. And this will be upper arm right. And you don't have to worry about zeroing this one out, but we will 0 the next ones out because we want them to be in a straight line if possible. Not hugely important, but it's just a good practice. If we can, we will, kind of thing. So next one is lower arm right. So I'm going to put that one there. Rename that, lower arm right. And this time, we want them to be in a straight line. So we want it on a straight line on Y, because we're not going up and down, we're going horizontally this time. So I'm going to type in Y, 0. Whoops, not on that joint. Sorry. Undo. We want to go lower arm right, and we want to make sure that's 0 on Y. So it's a nice straight line starting with the upper arm. Next one, we're going to pop right at the end. That'll be our last one in this chain. And we shall call this one hand right. And I am going to do that one, and we'll zero it out on Y. So it's in a straight line. You can see it moved there. And that one made bigger there. Okay, so that is that. That's looking pretty good. Now we just need to do the head. So the head comes off of the chest joint. So I'm going to go create joints. I'm going to select chest, and you'll notice it selects everything that's in that chain. So I'm going to put one at the base here. And we'll call that head, or maybe neck. It's more of a neck, I guess. And put that at 1, and we want to make sure this is vital, more vital than the arms and legs being zeroed out. We need that to be 0. You'll see it moved over a little bit. And then the last one in this chain will be the top of the head. So I'm going to click right there, and I'll call this one head top. And make sure at 0, very important, and we'll change that size back to 1, change that neck to 1, chest is, the whole radius thing is sort of like an OCD thing of mine. It doesn't really matter, it's just for visual. It doesn't really mean anything. So if you want to leave them big, small, once again you can modify that globally by going to animation, joint size, and I can scale them up and down like that. Okay, so this looks pretty good. I'm going to go back to my move tool, and let's get out of the front view and just see what's going on here. So by default, when you're in your front view and you create joints, they create it flat on this x-axis here. What we need to do, though, before we finish up, is typically you want to put a little bend in the elbow. So you only want to touch the z-axis. We don't want to go up or down because we want to maintain that straight line. So I'm going to move that back a little bit, and then I'm going to go here and move that forward, something like that. Okay, so the reason we do this, and we have to do that for the leg as well, so I'll go ahead and do that. Put it back more or less there. Actually, I wonder if I could just, yeah, there we go. So I'll do that with the wrist as well. I'll go to Z, type 0. Yeah, now it's back perfectly in line. Okay, so you're right. Why the heck would you do that? Well, because remember with the IK handle, I wonder if I still have that open. I do. So with the IK handle, you'll notice that it bends correctly. Maya has to know which way it bends. So if it was perfectly in line without a little sort of bend in the elbow, Maya might think that you want to bend the elbow the other way. So by putting that little bend, by putting this little bend in the elbow, you're sort of telling Maya which way you want it to bend with the IK handle on. So it is pretty important. Okay, we're running out of time, but I will try and do this as quickly as possible. So yeah, just put a little bend in the elbow and the knee, just so Maya knows which way to articulate the IK handle. I'm going to click here, and we're going to mirror stuff over. So let me just look. 1 second here. looking in my notes. Okay, so skeleton. We want to mirror it because we want the exact same thing on the other side. So I'm going to go to mirror joints and use the option box there. So I'll do that again. Skeleton, mirror joints, options. What we want to do is put this on YZ. So we're telling Maya what axis to mirror on. Let's hope this works. Cross your fingers, hit apply. Bam! That worked perfect. And Maya links it all up. It knows what it's doing because we selected this one. And if you look in your tree, everything's all good. So we want to do the same with the leg. So I'm going to hit that leg, upper leg, and hit apply. And that seemed to work pretty good as well. So that's done with the mirroring. And now all we need to do is go into these new mirrored joint chains and just change right to left, because this is left. And we will do the same over here with clavicle, starting with the clavicle, change all that to the left. I think there is, a student showed me actually figured out an automated way of doing this, which would be much easier last year, and that was very cool. So if you do look up here, there's a sort of like a find and replace, but I'm lazy. So now you can see the importance of naming things. Look at all this stuff in here. If it's not named, you're never going to find anything, and it's just going to be a mess. So name stuff. Took me a long time to get into that habit. I'm typically a pretty messy kind of guy, so I'm not super good at naming, but I really force myself to do that. So if you guys start naming stuff, you shouldn't have a problem. Okay, so I'm going to stop it here. We're over 20 minutes, and in the next, make sure you save her up. Next video, we will actually start putting in the IK handles and parenting everything up, and this should be done. And it'll be our first assignment complete. So